Sweet YouTube, welcome back to one of my videos. So today what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be talking about my opinion on the queer representation in a game called Gone Home. So this is a game that I've mentioned before in the channel when I picked it up physically on the Switch. This is a game that I have actually played through twice. It's a very short game, it's around 3 to 4 hours, and it is a walking simulator that follows a girl called Katie as she returns home from a trip overseas. It's also a game that I would consider to be more like an artsy game rather than like a typical kind of video game experience. Spoiler alert before I get into the representation, if you have not played the game, I'm going to be spoiling like the entire story in this representation kind of breakdown. So if you don't want the game to be spoiled and you haven't played it yet, please feel free to come back to this video after you've finished the game. Otherwise, if you don't mind spoilers, or if you've already played the game, you can continue watching. So the game starts off with Katie's, you return home, and you come in, you try and find the keys on the porch. So once you find the keys, you can start going around the house, and it opens you up to finding the journal entries that Katie's sister, Sam, has left for her because the house is completely empty. And you have to try and piece together the story of what happened when you were gone. So the story that you piece together is actually a queer story. It's about Katie's sister, Sam, who has wrote these letters, and she has met a girl called Lonnie at our new school. Lonnie and her become fast friends, they bond through playing Street Fighter, which sounds awesome to be fair, and listening to kind of grunge music, and that's how they've kind of become fast friends. And then they slowly realize over time and over the course of the journal entries, as you read them, you can see them developing feelings for each other. Although it's quite one-sided because it's kind of like Sam's developing feelings for Lonnie. And then they actually confess to each other that they have feelings for each other and actually kiss and become a couple after they go to a concert. I think that the representation in this game is fantastic because it feels very, very real and very authentic. Like, it feels like a real queer love story that you would just hear about. The love story between these two girls is really, really cute as well, like the way they talk about each other and stuff. It's very typical lesbian fashion. This is coming from a lesbian, so it's accurate. But I feel like these journal entries and these letters from Sam really does showcase kind of like what it's like to have like your first queer relationship. You know, every LGBT person, not every LGBT person yet, but every LGBT person will eventually feel this, or they already have. And it's a feeling that you can't really describe but you know it when you read it and you know it when you feel it, kind of thing. And I definitely felt that it captured this kind of moment in a queer person's life really, really, really well, and really showed that well in the game. You can also feel through the letters that Sam is kind of still figuring things out, because in this game she's 17, which is when you're like a little baby gay, you're still kind of figuring stuff out. But you can also see that she really does care about Lonnie, and she really, really wants this relationship with Lonnie to work out. And a lot of queer relationships do start in a similar way as to how theirs started, was like becoming friends, you know, in an area where nobody feels like they fit in, coming together over similar topics like that. That is sometimes how queer relationships start, because you think that you're becoming friends with someone and you don't really sometimes have the intention of dating someone when you start talking to them or start hanging out with them, but it sometimes just happens, especially if two people are kind of questioning and they're questioning at the same time and they just kind of get on well. Sometimes that will evolve into a relationship. Sometimes it won't, sometimes it does, but it's definitely something that I've seen in the queer community as being something that's quite common. Even though it does kind of showcase like the start of like a queer relationship and how amazing that feels, it also does showcase homophobia on the parent side, which is a narrative that can be seen in a lot of queer media. I find it hard to kind of see queer representation where there isn't like some kind of homophobia attached to it, which some will argue, yeah, that's realistic, but I think that we need to now start representing more accepting parents. I can't really pinpoint a storyline where there's been like fully accepting parents, which I think we need to change. I think there needs to be more shows where there's like fully accepting parents, or parents educating themselves. Maybe representing that narrative on screen could be a really cool thing that we might see soon in the future. But this game does not have that. It does showcase kind of homophobic parents, but In this era, the game is set in the late 90s. I think the date's actually 1995 this game's set in. So it would have been about a decade after the AIDS pandemic, so there would have been this kind of stigma around LGBT people in this game, so maybe their parents kind of carried that with them. So Sam's parents find out about her and Lonnie through school. The school phones the parents and say, hey, she's been hanging out with Lonnie, we think there's something going on. It's something along those lines. I know there definitely is like a phone call, and then like Lonnie's allowed to come over, but like the door has to stay open, they're not allowed to be like alone together and that sort of thing. Like the parents kind of throw the blame on Lonnie for kind of convincing Sam that she is gay, and they kind of just deny and sweep her sexuality under the rug, which completely sucks, and that is very homophobic. But that is sometimes a reality for a lot of queer people, that they don't have a safe space at home because either their parents don't understand or their parents don't want to understand. However, even though the game does kind of showcase that Sam isn't in a safe space at home, this game does have a happy ending and does give kind of a message of hope to LGBTQ plus people. And this is one of the reasons why I really love the game, because Sam and Lonnie actually have a happy ending. It's so rare that queer people do have a happy ending, that to find a game where they do have a happy ending is just really, really, really cool. So basically Lonnie is like a cadet, like she's training to be in the army, and it basically at the end of the game, it's her last few days and she's about to be shipped out to wherever they're going to station her, they don't know. Lonnie has been shipped out, and obviously Sam is completely upset because they basically had to break up because there was no way her and Lonnie could work out with the distance. However, the reason why nobody was home when Katie got home is because everybody is out looking for Sam, because Lonnie phoned Sam on a payphone. She got off the bus. She didn't actually end up going to her station in the army, and she phoned Sam on a payphone and told her, hop in the car, come and meet me, and we're just gonna run away and start our own life together, away from our homophobic parents, just away from everybody else. And of course, Sam has left these letters for Katie, so then she can kind of know where Sam is, and get kind of like the whole story. And that's how we, as the player, get the whole story as well. It is really rare, as I said, that LGBT people do get a happy story, and some people may argue that like, well, the ending's slightly open-ended, like we don't know if Sam and Lonnie actually did run away together, or if, you know, Sam is forcefully brought back home, or we don't actually know what happens because the game ends there. But I would like to think that they did get a happy ending. Running away from home is also a thing that does happen, fairly common in the LGBT community. I've heard of a lot less of it happening now, with obviously people being more accepting, but definitely a long time ago, it was very common for LGBT people to have to run away from home because they didn't have that safe space and they couldn't stay at home and express themselves and be themselves at home, or maybe their parents denied it, much like in Sam's circumstance. So I do think this is quite accurate of what would actually have happened back then. And even now, I think that happens in some circumstances where you have to run away and you have to find your own found family, because if you're not being accepted, sometimes the best thing to do is to just go, even if it's a hard decision to make. In conclusion, I think that this is still one of the best LGBTQ plus games I've ever played, because it feels like a story that really did and really would have happened. It just feels so authentic and real, and the journal entries by Sam really do feel like they were written by a real queer person. I don't know if the people who worked on this game, I couldn't find any information of whether or not they were queer, but it feels so authentic that I'm led to believe, just by how I feel about the game, that there had to be some queer people working on this, because it just feels so authentic and so real. You know, the journal entries really do, as you read them, it does feel like somebody trying to figure out their identity and someone just desperately trying to stay with the person that they fell in love with. That's what it feels like. It is a complete real lesbian love story in my mind. It was also one of the first games that I played after I came out, so I think that's why I kind of have that connection to the game. I came out as a lesbian, and then I played this game completely going in blind, and it just so happened to be a game about Sam figuring out her identity. And I think that that's just really, really cool that I kind of have that link. So maybe that's why I think this is good representation, because it helped me. And I always think that if representation helps somebody, then it is good representation in a way. Even now, when I go back and listen to the journal entries, they always make me feel emotional because they just feel so real. Especially the journal entries where it's Lonnie and Sam's last few days together. Those ones are really, really sad because you can see that they have like memories with each other and they don't want to leave each other, and like it's just really, really, really sad. I think that this story really does hit home with young LGBT people. However, I'm not sure how somebody from outside the community would actually feel playing this game, because they wouldn't be able to like relate to the journal entries or Sam's feelings or anything like that in the same way an LGBT young person would be. Which is why I think the game did get kind of mixed reviews when it came out. So I think that the representation in this game is really, really authentic, and that the relationship between Sam and Lonnie is represented beautifully. I think that Fulbright has done an amazing job on this game, and even though this game is like 7 years old at this point, I would really like to see Fulbright try and tackle a story like this in the future, because they've done such a great job on Gone Home. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. That was my opinion on the representation of Gone Home. Let me know if there's anything I missed about this game in the comments down below. I would absolutely love to read it. This is one of my favorite games of all time, I think. And I really, really loved kind of going through it and looking at the representation in the game. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, please give a big thumbs up. And also, subscribe to love. And hopefully, I will see you guys in the next video.